You get some sun? You look a little red.
Yeah, ran up here.
What happens when you're a redhead? You run around and you like turn into...
My running is very different from your running.
Welcome to Drunk Real Estate. Grab a drink and enjoy the show.
Hey there, and welcome to episode 17 of Not Drunk Real Estate. Once again, I am Kyle Wilson, and look who's back.
Woo!
Back again with a great backdrop and everything. We have AJ Osborne. How's it going, man?
Good to be back. I feel.
How was your hiatus there?
It was awesome. My boy turned 13, so we went up to Northern Canada. It was, I don't know, like 2 weeks. It was 10 days off the grid completely, and it was amazing. It was really cool experience to have with my son, why he still likes me before he turns into a full teenager and doesn't want dad around. So
yeah, I saw some of the pictures online. They looked amazing. It just seemed like just a great bonding experience with you and your son. It was really awesome. It was good to see. It's good to have you back. We joked a lot about enjoying you not being here, but good to have you back, buddy.
I understand, but you can't get rid of me, so here I am. So
where are you right now, by the way? You look like you're like in a skyscraper or something.
Yeah, I'm in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It's funny because we're actually in the middle of my event here. I walked off stage, came up here, sat down. I'm like, we're doing it. And they're like, could we do it maybe another time? I'm like, no, we're doing it now. So I just left the event, left stage, and I'm like, I'll come back later. So.
Well, that was the whole reason we're doing 1 p.m. So.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Next up, we have Jay. Once again, how's it going, man?
I am doing well. I like these afternoons. I mean, I'm not drinking because it is 1 p.m, but I'm wide awake and I'm excited. Actually, just got done listening to a Mauricio podcast on left field investors. So good job there, Mauricio.
Thank you. That's why you're wide awake. It was so riveting, and the SEC attorney just really, oozes good stuff. No, that was a fun podcast that we did with Jim. It was really awesome. He's just got a great podcast and a great.
You guys all doing that podcast? Because Jay, didn't you do that? And I know Ashley did that podcast too.
Yeah, so I guess I have to plug it now. So yeah, anybody listening, the Passive Investing from Left Field, I think, is the formal name of the podcast. And they interview operators, they interview LPs. So for anybody that's a passive investor, awesome podcast. And they also have a great community for passive investors if you want to associate with other people that are investing passively. So check out the Passive Investing from Left Field podcast.
Awesome. I'm assuming you're not drinking anything because it is 1 o'clock right now, or are you?
I am doing a virgin whiskey and water.
Looks delicious. Mauricio, what's up, dude?
What's going on, man? I'm still in my pajamas over here.
Yeah? How's it going over there?
It's early. It's good. I'm drinking a very special drink today. It's the 2023 Organic Alma de la Tierra Pete's Dark Coffee.
Ooh, you went with the instant brew.
Oh yeah, it's a K-cup. It's freaking amazing, actually. It's really nice and bold and dark, just like AJ.
Have you guys noticed how much happier Mauricio is in the afternoon podcast? He's not cranky. Like, get to evening and night, and Mauricio starts to get cranky.
I don't think I had COVID, but I was pretty sick last week. And but you know what? I sucked it up. I showed up to work and delivered the best performance I could. And now I'm in a good mood. But I'm sure that'll go away here pretty soon.
I hear you guys all trying to push for this earlier podcast, and I'm having none of it. I hate this. This is awful. None of us are drinking. It's screwing with my. I'm not drinking. It's screwing with my workout routine because I was supposed to get a workout in, and I had to push it back. I have to do my workout right after this. You know what I'm drinking? I'll show you what I'm drinking. I'm drinking C4 pre-workout right now, so that I can roll from this right into my workout. So I hate this, and this is not going to be a trend, no matter what you guys say.
All right, everybody. Let us know in the conferences or in the comments. Should we do it in the early afternoon so Mauricio's happy, or stick it late at night so these three are a little more boozed up?
Yeah, we'll just change. We'll just have to come up with a completely new name for this podcast because it's not going to be drunk real estate.
It is your choice. You're not drinking in the afternoon. Don't put that.
It is my choice, but I knew none of you were going to be drinking, so I was like, I'm not going
to. You know what? That's not true. I was actually going to drink a beer, and I just forgot it because I don't have beer here at the office.
If you had a beer, I would have ran to the other room and grabbed a beer. I just didn't want to drop a barbell on my face after getting drunk real estate.
We've gone from crotchety Mauricio to crotchety Kyle.
Well, yes. one of us has to be crotchety. Got to hold up the. We have a quota to meet. All right, let's get right into this because I know AJ's got to get back on stage for his conference. So we'll start off once again with Jay and his economic updates.
Wait. Why do we always start with Jay? It's like we always start with Jay. Like, are AJ and my starts not good enough for you guys? I mean,
if we put Jay at the end with the economic update, then no one's going to stick around to the end. We got to keep the good stuff for later so that people listen all the way through.
Makes sense. All right, I take it back. That makes sense. All right, go ahead, Jay. You talk about your.
So the biggest news last week was obviously we had the FOMC meeting. It was pretty well forecasted that they weren't going to raise the rates, and sure enough, they didn't raise the rates. So after that, all Powell had to go out is just toe the line, say everything was normal, we're not changing anything. And unfortunately, he did not do that. He rocked the boat. 10-year Treasury went up to over 4.5%, sent mortgage rates to their highest level in 23 years. So, Jay, why don't you kind of recap what happened in this last week?
Yeah, so nothing much happened. As expected, there was a 99% chance just before the meeting of no rate hike, and that's what we saw, no rate hike. Jerome Powell did talk tough like he always does, but if you actually read the words that he was saying, there wasn't a lot to make you think that it's likely that we're going to have another rate hike over the next several months unless something changes. Some of the things he talked about credit tightening. And so obviously that's not going to be necessarily good for the economy. He talked about employment softening. In fact, those were his words. He said there were, quote, higher rates weighing on business investment. And anybody that follows the economy knows that where businesses go, typically the economy follows. And so weighing on business investment, basically meaning businesses spending less money, not good for the economy. He did say the labor market is tight, but in quote unquote better balance, meaning it's softening. And that's what we're seeing from the numbers as well. We saw inflation go up a little bit last month, which was the one sign that maybe we needed to see another rate hike. But the big driver of inflation going up last month was energy, oil prices, gas prices through the roof. But the government typically doesn't look at food or energy as kind of the short-term drivers of inflation because we don't have a lot of control.
Biden's talking to Venezuela. He's got that under control.
Yeah, I don't think anybody could have that under control right now, unfortunately. And that's part of the reason why we don't look at it because it's not within our control for the most part. So long story short, Jerome Powell said, yeah, we may do another hike this year. We're seriously considering it. We're keeping our eyes on the markets, on the data. But at the end of the day, I mean, there's too much softening going on that I think it's unrealistic to think, again, unless something changes, that we really are going to have another hike later this year. Now, I don't think we're going to have a cut this year unless, again, something big changes in the other direction. I think we're basically just here at 5.25%, 5.5% for the rest of the year.
My biggest thing with listening to him is, so you put up the dot plots, he says all these things about where we project we're going to be. And basically all of his projections say we're going to have this soft landing. But then someone comes right out and says, oh, is soft landing your base case? And he flat out negated that and said that is not our base case. But if you actually look at the data and what they're putting out, like the only way you could achieve that is with a soft landing.
That's the part that makes no sense, by the way, because I think you're right. Nothing really new happened from the sort of the rate hike and the meeting and all that stuff. It was expected, but then he had the press conference, right? Or so he was starting to yabber about a bunch of stuff, and it sounded like he was really becoming a little bit more hawkish, and that's why the markets. Actually, I'm looking at the charts here. The market's like a nice little dump, but they were talking about having the rate hikes be the interest rate being higher for longer. So I think everybody was thinking, oh, maybe Q1 they'll start lowering them, and now it looks like it's towards you've got the graph up there a little bit later on in the year. But again, this this goes to my point that I've been making here for like sounding like a broken record. I mean, this is all if the Fed had their own way, right? If they could dictate what was going to happen, then this is what they would like to happen. But again, the first thing that's going to happen if something doesn't go according to plan, if there is some kind of a major event, their job is to cut, and they're going to cut way sooner than they actually want to cut. When they cut, it's not going to be because they want to. It's going to be because they have to. And I still stick by that thesis. That's my base case, whether that happens in Q4, Q1, whatever. But it's not going to be because they decide that it's time. We've done the soft landing and we're going to start cutting the rates. It's going to be something, whatever it is, happens, and it's going to force them to cut rates.
Yeah, I mean, as Mauricio said, this what we're looking at. So I just put up what's called the Fed dot plot, and basically this is each of the members of the FOMC committee who not vote, but basically give their opinion on over the next several years where they think different things. On this chart, it's interest rates are likely to be over the next couple of years, and so each dot is a representation of one person's opinion. And so for those who are listening and can't see this, basically the consensus is that in 2024 we're going to see interest rates lower than they are today. Basically in 2023 we're going to see interest rates essentially where they are today. Some people think maybe a small cut, but we're basically where we are for the rest of this year. And then next year we see a drop probably to around 5%. Then that curve kind of flat or widens. So there's a lot more disagreement in 2025. Some of the Fed members think we're still going to be over 5. Some think we're going to be under 3. Get to 2026 and further. And basically the consensus is that we're probably going to be under 3% for federal funds interest rates. So again, as Mauricio said, this isn't kind of what's going to drive rates. The market's going to drive rates, but keep in mind that the people that are putting out these dots, putting out these opinions, are the same people that are ultimately going to vote on whether we increase or stay steady or cut rates. So they do have some say.
Can we talk about that one dot for 2024 that was just way up there? Just the one person just said, "Hey, screw it! I'm going to vote that if this is going way up and going to the moon, just in case they're right. That could be like their claim to fame the rest of their life."
Yeah, there's it's between 6 and 6.25. Somebody voted. Somebody gave
just one single dot.
Yeah. Yep. By the way, if you're listening to this on the podcast and you can't see it, I would again highlight or encourage you guys to go check it out also on the YouTube channel, because we do have all the graphs up there. But yeah, they're all over the place.
Yeah, and so here's the other thing that Powell didn't really talk about this, but we've seen a bunch of data over the last week or two that makes it look like housing is softening a little bit as well. So number one, builder confidence came out. The builder confidence number came out last week, and it was below 50, which is a 5-month low. 50 is kind of that middle ground, but are builders bullish or are they bearish? And so it's below 50. And so builders are a little bit less confident than they are now than they have been over the last year or two. We saw housing starts, which as a reminder is basically the number of builders that are starting new construction projects, lowest level since 2020. Now, we did see permits up, so it looks like a bunch of builders are pulling permits like they plan to start building, but they're not starting for some reason. I don't know if that's a labor shortage. I don't know if that's material and labor prices, but for some reason, all these permits aren't actually turning into built houses or built developments. And the other thing, we just saw the home sales numbers lowest since January, so we're not seeing any transaction volume. So all in all, we're not seeing prices go down yet, which I guess is a big component of this. But a lot of other things are starting to make it look like housing is softening.
Yeah, I mean, the construction thing makes total sense. I mean, I know Ken Macro has been talking about this a lot because he's got some construction projects. But obviously, when you got the permits and started the construction project, that started with an interest rate that was much lower than it was now. And so when you're looking at, what is it going to do to get the takeout financing, that's way higher. Not to mention all the inflation on the expense side, all the materials, right? The cost of putting this together, whether it's labor, materials, that's also going through the roof. So people who were pro forma-ing those construction projects 2 or 3 years ago look very, very different than they do today. And there's a good argument to be made that a lot of those projects aren't going to get completed because they're not going to be able to get the necessary finance or get it under the budget that they were originally promised.
We had to go to 100+ banks for one of our development projects, and finally we left the bank ecosystem completely and went to a private lender. And you got to realize when people are like, okay, we were putting 40% down, and in one case, we were putting the project as a whole is roughly, it was right about $24 million. We had $10 million we were putting down. And then we were putting another $10 million in a bank account. And they still were like, we don't know if we want to do this. So to say they were conservative isn't correct, right? It was so over the top. Basically, it's a risk off. So all these banks, we'd be working with two, and then they just come out and say, top down, risk off. It's just we're not doing this anymore. And the financing level for those that are not in a position to where they have huge amounts of cash or equity to be putting and borrowing as, I don't know how you get it done on a lot of these projects because banks just won't touch it.
And AJ, one of the interesting things that to that point is that a lot of people, along the arguments of the soft landing, a lot of people are expecting these interest rates to come down, and then that's going to be good for everyone. It's going to be great for multifamily. It's going to be great for commercial. It's going to be great for development. But that doesn't take into account that, yeah, the interest rates might be lower, even if they are lower. But if the lending standards are just as strict, just because you've got a lower interest rate doesn't mean you have access to that capital. We all remember back in 2008, 2009, interest rates were like at zero, but good luck getting a loan just to get a single family home. You had to give up an arm and a leg, and you had to have a 900 credit score, and you have to have $2 billion in the bank. And so even if interest rates start going down, even today, as I understand it, and AJ, you're in this more than that. This is, I'm getting this all stuff from Ken. His projects, they're doing 55% loan to value. I mean, it used to be 80, 70. Now it's down to 55. So just because it's lower interest rate doesn't mean you have access to the capital.
Which, and two, not only access to the capital, lots of times it doesn't pencil.
But if you want to talk about one of the big reasons for that is interest rates, though, because they're right now we're not LTV constrained. Like it's not like it used to be before interest rates were so low that banks would cut you off at 70, 75 LTV. That's what would constrain you. Now it's the debt service coverage ratio that's constraining you. So you're not making enough income. So yes, the LTV is 55, but it's not like banks are saying, oh, we won't go above 55 LTV. No, it's because they won't go above a certain debt to income ratio. And that's what's bringing it down to 55. So if we do see these interest rates come down, and cost of construction, we've seen at least lumber and a few other things have come down a little bit too. They were pretty astronomical there for a while, so there is some encouraging signs for that. So hopefully, especially with long lagging construction like multifamily, or I assume self storage is a little bit quicker than multifamily, but where it takes at least 18 months. If we see that cost of capital come down, I think we're going to see another huge uptick in starts.
But one of the problems that we're seeing is actually it's not even any of that. It's the outside forces. So when banks are looking at it, they see softening in rates across the board. And so how they are performing everything right now is they are doing just net zeros. They're like, okay, I don't care. What's the lowest discounted rate? What's the lowest rate? Net zero to that. And we are not building in hardly any rate increases, if any. And what happens is you have the all-time highest cost, both in debt and also materials. And then you are underwriting that at rates that are basically falling. And so that outlook is astronomically negative. So when you're looking at a DCR, to Kyle's point, and you have interest rates of 7%, and you have rates down in that market 10, 12%.
And just to clarify, when you say you're using rates both as interest rates and market rent rates.
And market rent, excuse me. Yes, you're exactly right. So you have those two inputs. You have revenue, they look at going down, and then you have this interest rates that is astronomically high. And then the materials, those three come together, and the banks are looking at it on that DCR, to Kyle's point. They're like, this doesn't make sense, right? And that's one of the biggest problems you're getting at. Even in self-storage, where they're looking at it saying, we're going to average your rents off these lows at a 3%. And we're like, that's not how storage works, right? We give like a 60% rate increase. But they refuse to do it. And so we're mapping out at a 3% rate increase where that's never even happened in storage annually for years on in-place rents, not external rents. And that's making projects in a lot of these things, you can't get them done.
Let's talk about the 10-year treasury here a little bit too, because when we talk about indexing, most of these projects, if you're talking about long-term rates, go to the 10-year treasury. And we had a discussion before, and I was wrong. I think Jay was along there with me, where we didn't think the 10-year treasury was going above 4. And now after this, it bumped up above 4, and then it hung around at 4.2, 4.3, and then all of a sudden after this meeting, it's now at 4.5. So what's going on with this?
Well, I think it's a couple things. Number one, there are inflation fears. And so when we have inflation, investors are not putting money necessarily in treasuries because they know hard assets are going to continue to go up. And so there's less demand for treasuries, and that increases yields. So that's number one. As long as there's inflation concerns and inflation pressures, we're going to see treasuries not go down. But the other thing that we're seeing is that the Fed is issuing a lot of bonds right now. They've been issuing a lot of bonds for the last several months. And so with this extra supply, basically in order to encourage people to buy these bonds, well, they don't do this, but it's market forces to encourage people to buy the bonds. Rates need to be higher, and rates will keep going up until people start buying. And so with the Fed issuing all these bonds, we're going to see rates go up probably for the near future. I like you said, Kyle, we were both wrong on this. I was really surprised to see treasuries go above 4. Then I was surprised to see them go above 4.2. Now I thought there was no way they were going up to 4.5, and here we are well above 4.5, and it looks like they're anchored there for the time being. So I mean,
Mauricio, we did good on that one.
Yeah, Mauricio called this one, and keep in mind the 10-year treasury. The reason this is important is this is what, for the most part, drives mortgage rates. And so as treasury rates go up, mortgage rates have been going up, and we're in the 7s now, and there's talk of it going over 8 for 30-year fixed.
It makes no sense to me conceptually, because if you look at the Fed's own dot plot, where they think, even in their soft landing, where they think things are going, they're slowly over the next couple of years going down to a terminal rate of 3, 2, 2.5, somewhere in that range. So if in the next 2 years they're down at 2.5%, then that means like the 10-year treasury is supposed to be conceptually like an average over what your rate you're going to get over the next 10 years. So if we're at 5.5 right now, and we're going to be at 2.5 in 2 years, and we're going to hold there, like that math just doesn't work.
Yeah, but Kyle, it's like I'm here and you don't listen to what I'm saying. It's like I've been telling you every episode. This is what's happening is that the bond market doesn't believe the Fed. That's what's happening. The Fed is saying this is what we're going to do, and the bond market is like, I don't believe you. I think you're wrong. I don't think you have any idea.
So you think the bond market thinks that we're going to have like 4% interest rates for the next 10 years?
I think they think for definitely a prolonged period of time, but to the bond market, it's just I completely agree. I think we could get to 5, because what you're seeing here is the market's totally not aligned with the Fed, obviously, and I think it's also the market's fragmented on individuals. What's happening on Main Street is not what's happening on Wall Street, and the bond market is a safe haven for people. And I don't know. I just don't think that we have any alignment between the government and the business.
But even if you look at the SOFR curve, like, what to Mauricio's point, what like the outside bond market believes is going to happen, it has it dropping down as well. So like, yes, it has it holding higher at that 4% range, but like that math still doesn't add up to a 4.5 10-year.
One of the things we don't talk about, I was actually thinking about this the other day, we should do an episode on this, but one of the things we don't talk about enough is that, especially when it comes to the 10-year, I mean, this is one of the most deepest markets in the world. This is not a US market. This is a world global market. So we're talking about global players. And so you've got to take into account what's going on in the market. You've got to take into account what's going on in Germany and what a German investor would be doing. And hey, what do they think about rates going up? And
that's a good point. Like if you look at Japan right now, like Japan's got a currency issue, right? So what are they going to do to prop up their currency? They're going to sell US treasuries and buy their own currency. So like it is really hitting supply and demand.
China's the largest holder of foreign currencies because of that reason right there. Because China's their currency has to be backed, and how that works too is their imports. So China, how they work is their exports, they get paid back in other currencies, not their own, right? and they encourage that. So they're the largest exporter of the world. And as you've seen exports start to lift and China's trying to get back into that market, everything, they're trying to balance out their currency. So they're stashing all of that cash and they're holding it, and because it supports their currency. So for China, the more currency, not their own, that they are holding, plus the larger exports, is the way they stabilize their own currency. And I think you have a currency problem around the globe because of inflation and oversupply. So everybody's coming, right? I mean, you look at South America, right? I mean, look at Europe, look at all of them. So everybody is trying to shore up on this to balance and stabilize their own currencies. And I don't think that's going anywhere.
Here's the thing that I think we're going to see. And if Mauricio is right about us hitting some economic headwinds in the near future, if we run into a recession come later this year, beginning of next year, I think as soon as those signs of a clear and obvious recession, a softening economy, rear its head, we're going to see investors, both small and large, meaning governments, flee to security. And security is U.S. Treasuries. And all that demand is going to push rates down. And so I think we could see continued high Treasury rates over the next weeks, months, however long. But as soon as we see some clear indication that the economy is softening, I think that number is going to come down very significantly and very quickly.
Yeah, I agree with that. But one other point I'd like to make too is that we're looking at the 10-year, which I guess is at 4.55 now. It's still inverted. It's still lower than the 2-year. So you could argue that this should be at 5.1, 5.2, 5.3 if everything was rosy and everything was going according to plan. It's still depressed vis-a-vis what the rest of the curve looks like. And so that's just another point to keep in mind.
I agree. That's why I think we could hit 5.
Well, everything's on the table, but if we hit that 5% range, that'd be even worse for everyone trying to buy houses. And I'm going to use that as a pivot into our next.
Wait, real quick before we go on that, real quick, I've been kind of just starting to have fun and learning a little bit about chart reading and stuff. It's just kind of something I'm interested in. And they're those that know charting better than I do show that we're hitting up a trend line at 4.5. So they are expecting a little technical bounce back and go a little bit lower before it goes to 5. So there's just something to keep in mind as well. It's kind of fun to learn a little charting.
Very cool. There you go. That's probably all because of the podcast, Mauricio. So now you're getting more into researching stuff like that, and so you're welcome. Let's talk about some of the big boys and how these mortgage rates are affecting people. We've been talking a lot about how financial conditions are affecting individual investors, but Mauricio sent us an article from the Wall Street Journal talking about how large landlords are getting squeezed as well. So Mauricio, what was that article all about?
Yeah, so there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal, and so I read that, and then I got to give props to my buddy George Gammon actually brought this up, so this is a lot of stuff coming from him. But the article itself was actually just talking about how the large home buyers, which remember after 2008 when the whole thing collapsed, a lot of institutional buyers came in, right? Not just mom and pop or small investors, but huge Blackstone and all of these private equity firms. They started gobbling up all of these single family homes, which I remember back in 2010, 11, we were all a little bit concerned about that, because if they're buying up all this stuff and then they decide to unload it at some point, that's going to create an issue in the housing market. But that's continued actually. So even as recently as 2022, 21, 22, a lot of these single family homes are being bought by these huge institutional investors. And in some markets, and that was mentioned in the Wall Street Journal, some markets like Miami and Florida, like 25% of the homes are actually owned by these huge institutional players, meaning they're purely not going to be owner occupied. They're looking for renters.
Not owned. I think 25% were being purchased, not owned entirely, like of the entire housing stock. Yeah,
purchased, correct. They've been purchased by institutions. Yeah, well, I don't know what the difference is.
25% that's coming on the market, or that's
25% of the purchases were being bought by people who are basically never going to live in them. It's not that 25% of the houses are owned by.
Yeah, and so what's been interesting is that these huge institutional buyers, they don't buy with debt. I mean, this is literally a conservative play for them. They own this all in cash, and so when they bought these things, they're yielding 5-6%, 4-5-6%, and it's pure cash. So I'll give you an example. They're buying a portfolio. Let's say it's $1 million portfolio. Maybe it's spinning off $60,000 a year, 6% yield. They're kind of happy. But these days, it's getting harder and harder for them to find that kind of yield in the marketplace. And so they're starting. The whole point of the article was that they were having a hard time finding deals. And so they're actually starting to build their own. They're just going to start doing some build to rents because they're under the belief, which I think is a mistaken belief, that rents still have a lot of room to go up, because people, who cares? Like if the market demands more rent, people will just pay more rent, which is kind of a faulty argument. But what's interesting is that what's going on right now with these huge institutional buyers is that as the properties have gone up, so let's just give this example of the $1 million portfolio spinning off $60,000. When that value of the portfolio has gone up to let's say 1.5 million, that yield has come down to below 6%. It's like, that would be about a 4%, where they're actually they're getting a better yield putting the money in the bank, right? Because they can put the money in the bank or a money market account or something super conservative and get like 5.5%, let's call it 5%, right? So a lot of these institutional buyers are starting to sell their inventory because they can actually get a higher yield on their money putting it in the bank, right? Because these are now yielding 3 or 4%. They can literally cash out on those investments and put it into something conservative, like literally a savings account in the bank, and get a better yield. So why take the risk of having real estate when you can literally have a risk-free rate? What's the 2-year J? 5+, right? And so the argument, or the thing, just a thought experiment that we were going through is, as we all know, the price of housing is really met at the margins, right? I don't know how many housing stock is out there, but really the price is dictated by whatever the little margin that's on for sale. I just looked up at how many homes were for sale in Miami today, and there's like 3,500 homes that are for sale. And so what the article was saying is that a lot of these institutional are starting to unload some of this inventory because, again, they're better off selling and putting the money in the bank. They'll get a better yield. And so it's just interesting from my perspective, as everybody's talking about this low inventory because interest rates are so low, and you all hear the statistics. We've said it on the show as well that 60% of people own a home with a mortgage of less than X or Y and all this stuff. These institutional buyers own these houses free and clear, zero, but they are starting to sell some of these products, and they're when they're being interviewed, their plan is to sell in the second half of the year, which we're already halfway through that, into this market because, again, they're just getting a better yield selling those single family homes and putting that money into the bank accounts. And so it's just going to be interesting to see. That's definitely an argument for, in terms of increasing the amount of liquidity in the single family market, because, again, if all of these guys own tens of thousands of units, right? This is not something that just owns 20 or 30 or 40, but if somebody owns 10,000 units and decides to unload, a quarter of that portfolio, well, now they're unloading 2,500 units, right? And if you're in a marketplace that doesn't have that much inventory for sale, that really could, double the inventory when that happens. And so it's just going to be something interesting to look for. I think it's another argument to say that, yeah, right now inventories might be a little tight, but again, in combination with unemployment, we talked about this last week, when unemployment starts going through the roof, which is what the Fed is trying to do, when people start losing their money, losing their jobs, and having to sell. They don't want to sell their home, but they're going to be forced to sell their home because they need access to that equity. This is just another headwind there in terms of or maybe a tailwind in terms of inventory, where you've got institutional buyers that are going to start unloading some of these just for the mere fact that they get a better yield putting the money in the bank, because the numbers just don't work out for these big players right now. And so all that wave of buyers that came in 2008, 2009, 2010, these huge private equity groups that still have inventory or have continued to acquire, they may start turning a little bit because of what's going on with the yields, and they may start, they are starting to sell, and it'd be interesting to see how that affects home prices.
It seems like these firms are pretty convinced that we're going to have some sort of recession event, because they're doing, to what your point is, they're selling their homes right now, but at the same time, they're raising these massive funds to buy single family homes, because they think that there's going to be distressed or motivated sellers coming up. So that to me says that they're planning on some sort of recession happening.
Yeah, but what it was really funny watching. If you guys have access to Wall Street Journal, I highly recommend looking at it. What was funny to me, and this is again something I want to give credit to George, that the article was saying, the so-called experts were saying this is a great time to own single families because the prices have gone up, but the rents haven't quite kept pace. And so they are seeing a potential of rents could go higher, even another 30%. So whatever the current levels are. And, for all of us who are in the real estate world, especially in the single family, because they're buying, entry level homes, it's very, I won't say it's the same as C-class, but they're very sensitive to rent hikes. It's not like you can just suddenly increase your rent and bump the rents 10% or 20%. And they're like, oh, well, I guess I just have to pay my rent an increase. I mean, they're already getting to the point where they're having trouble keeping that rent. As you guys know, we talked about it last week, rents are actually starting to flatten and go down. But the assumption under the model that these guys have is that they think they can continue to raise rates, because you'd have to go another 30% before you get equal to whatever it costs for home ownership. So the assumption is we can just raise rents for another 30% here over the next 5 or 10 years, when I think I think everybody in this panel here doesn't believe that's true, that at some point you can try and raise rents, but the everyday consumer of the home, they're starting to get squeezed, right? Their rents, there's inflation going on, and their wages aren't necessarily keeping pace with that. So their real wages are really actually going down, even though nominally they may be going up a little bit. But they're going to have a hard time raising rents on a lot of these folks, and if they can't raise rents, then the whole model kind of falls apart. But anyway.
Yeah, I find it interesting that, and I thought to Kyle's point that they're selling off a lot of this inventory, and then they're raising these large funds to buy inventory, presumably when the market goes down, and they can basically take advantage of a softening economy. The weird thing is, and I have some thoughts on why this may be the case, but the misnomer that I've been talking about for a dozen years now of the strategy of selling your properties in hopes that the market's going to correct and we can then rebuy those same properties or other properties at a lower rate, is that it's not free to sell or buy a house. On the sales side, you're going to incur 4%, 5%, 6% commissions, then closing costs, franchise taxes, transfer taxes, all these other things that you're going to incur on the sales side. On the purchase side, you're going to have closing costs, and you might have inspections, you might have appraisals. And so you're looking at 10, 12, 15% if you're a smaller buyer of costs that you're going to incur to sell a property and then rebuy that same property or another property in the same market. So you have to believe that the correction we're going to see is at least 10 or 12 or 15% for that to be a viable strategy, a viable business model. And I don't know about you guys, but I mean, how many corrections have we had over the last 100 years where we've seen home values drop by 10 or 12 or 15% one time?
One time. In fact, before the financial crisis, it never happened. Ever since they were keeping track, the average home price in the U.S. had never gone down. That was one of the arguments back in 06, 07. And of course, that changed in 08.
Yeah, but if you don't have a floating rate mortgage though, or sorry, if you don't have a fixed rate mortgage though, and you like have one of these obscenely low mortgage rates of 3-4%, then it's not a bad move right now. Like if you want to look at, like, we're seeing negative rents, we're seeing skyrocketed mortgage rates. So like if you're having to pay those, and yet the prices that people are garnering for buying these single family homes are still relatively elevated, I don't think it's a bad play.
Compared when they bought it. I mean, lots of these people bought 4 years ago, 5 years ago. The equity in their house is enormous. So yeah, if you timed it as a percentage in a 1 year period of time of people that bought it to today, of course, if you're looking at it like that, that's different. But even then, if they have a 3% interest rate, it's not, but if you bought anywhere 3 years ago and behind, I mean, your equity is huge.
Yeah, but you can do it. You should just take not that we're giving financial advice, but you just take a cash out refinance and put it in the bank and have that money ready to go whenever.
Yeah, but do you want to do a refi that right now? That's my point. Like, you're going to be getting 9%, 10% interest rates. So like if you're having to, yes. Okay. If you have a 3 or 4% interest rate, like if you got to, a local bank at a commercial rate in one of these single family houses and you got one of those rates, then yeah, to Jay's point, like you could have to see a huge correction for this to make sense. But if you're having to pay these high interest rates because you have a floating rate or something like that, like I don't think it's a bad play to take advantage of the fact that these houses are still getting high prices to sell, get out and, wait a little bit, put your money in treasuries get that 5% and wait and see, okay, when we do have some sort of correction, we have that the interest rates drop, and then maybe we'll start seeing the rent bumps again. And then the numbers are going to make a little bit more sense. But I don't think it's a bad play to kind of take some chips off the table, take some risk off, and then there might be opportunity. Maybe you won't, but at least maybe you'll just break even then.
What do you think of the investment thesis, though, from these going back to these institutional buyers? I mean, basically their investment thesis is we're going to have, I think what they're saying is not necessarily there's a recession, but there's inflation. They think over the next 10 years, this is going to be an inflationary decade, which I agree with, by the way, but these homes aren't getting any cheaper, right? So they're already pretty unaffordable. So home affordability is going to be harder and harder and harder for the average American, which means more and more people are going to be forced to rent, which creates the sort of the demand for the rents, for the rental product. And again, the idea is that we can even jack up rents even further because there's such a huge disparity between a mortgage these days and rents. But that's really the thesis that these institutional buyers are going.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to see housing prices go substantially lower. I'm always worried about making big financial decisions to time markets. And not only is it not cheap, but two, you also have a problem that if you sell your house and somebody moves in, where do you go? I mean, right now to find a place to rent, whether that's a house or whatnot, in most cities, that is really hard. And the driving factor problem we have here is we have just no inventory. And as we've already found out, builders aren't building. They stopped. And so this problem is actually getting worse. It's not getting better. And so I think we got, this issue where if you look at other countries, by the way, our housing market is so affordable. So when you look at areas like Canada, Europe, New Zealand, Australia, I mean, you're getting everything in there is $1 million plus. Everything. They live in a world of perpetual unaffordability.
Well, because we're the only country of those that basically has a 30-year fixed mortgage. None of these other countries, like if you want to use Canada.
Exactly. You refi every 5 years. Mandatory.
Yeah, exactly. You the best you can do is a 10-year. But the standard there is 2, 3, 5 years. You have to redo your mortgage. So it's
and their prices are huge.
Yeah, but that would mean the prices should be lower.
Exactly. They're not. So I think there's this idea in America that we've had such cheap housing prices for so long that it's like, oh, well, of course they're either going to go down. But when you look at other developed countries and everything, their unaffordability level is astronomical compared to us. Outside cities like LA, New York, which of course there. But I mean, for the most part of America, like houses are not relatively that unaffordable in comparison. And so I think that we can, I don't think we want to, I think it's not a bad thing, but I think if you look at other case studies, it doesn't mean prices have to come down. I don't know that that's actually even a given. And I think it could be very much the opposite. In 5 years, they're higher.
Well, what's the scenario where they do come down? I don't see a scenario that actually, like, you have to have such a high supply demand imbalance, and I just don't see that happening.
You mean like all the institutional guys unloading their single family homes?
And that's the thing. I think we're conflating two things here. We started this conversation with institutionals selling off, and now we kind of transitioned into should homeowners be selling their properties at 3% mortgages. And I certainly agree with AJ that it makes no sense as a homeowner to sell a home with a low mortgage just so you can buy a higher price house with a much higher mortgage right now. But I suspect that what's going on with the institutions, and I don't know for this for certain, I don't know exactly how they run their businesses, but I suspect at least some of them are on a typical private equity fund model or venture capital type model where they take fees 2.5%, and then take a piece of the profits. It's often called a 2 and 20 model, where they'll take some fees every year and then they'll take 20% of the profits at the end. It's advantageous for them to be selling because that's where they generate their 20% of the profits. And so I wouldn't be surprised if some of these institutions are basically selling off, shutting down their funds and starting new funds. So basically they can take not their investors' chips off the table, I guess they're doing that too, but take their own chips off the table and basically cash out and lock in their profits and then basically start the whole thing over. And you got to kind of wonder if any of these institutions own a large enough stake in a market where if they start selling off a significant number of properties, is that going to basically create a run on the market and other people get scared and they start selling and prices start going down and it snowballs and then they have an opportunity to buy back? They're basically fixing their own market.
But then Mauricio also said the other thing they're doing is they're doing build to rent, right? And we had Kathy on the other day talking about the build to rent. And so the numbers aren't working as well for them, the single family, but they can make them work at scale by doing these large build to rent communities. So that's going to be putting supply back on the market. So, they need to keep, to your point, they need to keep money moving, right? They can't just have money sit there and they're not going to, 2% fees aren't going to sustain them. So they have to keep money moving. So they're going to find a way. And it seems like one of the ways they're finding is by building more rentable single family or, duplexes or quads or whatever to kind of just that's going to add to the supply and offset that a little bit.
Yeah. Cause I mean, that was the point of the article was that, they're just, their yields right now, their current yields are below what they get from the bank, and then when they're looking to buy, they're buying yields below to the bank. So why would you go buy this piece of property when I can get a better yield putting it in the bank? I mean, that's really where we're at, right? So anyway, maybe we should go over to JJ before he's got to get back.
Yeah, well, that's I debated on whether I proposed this topic, and I debated whether to put it out there because I know this is just straight red meat for AJ, and he might just go on such a rampage right now that we're gonna have to cut the entire episode. But
No way.
we're going to talk about the lack of financial education in schools, and the reason I'm bringing it up again is because a couple of weeks ago we discussed the 1% Zillow mortgages. And the requirement that applicants needed to take some sort of financial literacy class. And then Jay threw out this stat about previous loan programs and basically how previous loan programs, even though they were very unqualified to get these loans, they had to take these financial literacy classes to get these special programs, and that their default rate was like less than 1%, even though they were very unqualified. Yes. So it got me thinking that like if a simple like financial literacy, and like this is only a few hours of class, can bring down the mortgage default rates so much, then like what are we doing wrong in schools right now that people just don't have that even fundamental knowledge of how mortgages work? So I looked into it further, and only 27% of teenagers know what inflation is and can do a simple interest rate calculation. So I know, AJ, your family approaches school education a little bit differently. So why don't I'll just give you the floor, and where is our education system falling short here?
I find that funny, by the way, because I've noticed that like 100% of people on social media know what inflation is, and they know what causes it, and they know how to fix it, and they know who to blame. And so it's funny, only 17% of teenagers do.
Actually, it's funny you bring that up. And I had this stat, I was going to throw it out later, but since you brought this up, 42% of teens report they learn financial tips from social media. So that's a bit of a scary stat there. But AJ, the floor is yours.
All right. Thank you for the floor. Time to mop it up. Just kidding. I won't be brutal. So, all right, everybody. So I think the reason why this is just an interesting, obviously, topic for me, my wife created a school that focuses around everything from finance to practical applications. It's no secret that the United States school system, just sucks. If you look at the overall ranking as far as the world goes on any topic, we don't even hit. We fall behind in everything, especially when it comes to developed worlds. When it comes to mathematics, we're behind Hungary, we're behind Lithuania, we're everybody. Like the United States school system's fundamentally broken. And if you look at what's happened with private schools, as well as homeschooling, homeschooling has skyrocketed. Now, a lot of people say, oh, well, that's because of COVID-19. But actually, if you go back to the school system prior to COVID-19, it had already taken off. This started after 2010, really. And this move to homeschooling and private schooling in the United States, you're talking about levels that are unrecognizable to anything where they used to be. When everything from surveys show, parents, everybody, what seems to be a driving factor now is if you have if you have the opportunity to choose, they take it. If not, you're stuck. And that's obviously a big, big problem. So people that like public schools are generally the ones that have moved to areas where the public schools are better for their children. So even that in the United States is completely skewed. And that's, once again, an option. So people that like private schools or public schools are taking the option to buy expensive houses, live in nice areas where they get a higher level of schooling. And so you're either choosing to move where you get a schooling system in the public that other people don't. You go to private school, or people are moving to homeschools. And this trend has been, I think, a wake-up call for a lot of people, where we feel that the school system, our rankings are failing, but also they don't feel like they get anything good out of it. So the kids, as how much they study, what they do to test, testing scores in the United States, both at college and lower, have been lowered for the ability to make more people pass. So we've actually lowered our criteria so that we can show more people are passing. So when you look at it, we definitely don't match up when you say, oh, well, our average grades are this, but performance is lower. And so this overall trend shows massive gaps and holes in the economy where we just have these fundamental educational holes, and finance is the biggest one, where it's not taught. It's not even viewed as important, which we think's absurd, because hands down, dictating your life moving forward, earning money, being able to afford a home, taking care of yourself, being able to afford rent, food, that's going to dictate everything. That's it, right? And we'd say, oh, well, yeah, but math's important. Well, we fail at that anyways. Science is important. Yeah, but we're failing at that anyways. So it's obviously not that important because nobody's learning it. And so like my wife started a school because...
But AJ, wait. If a train is traveling at 36 miles per hour in direction A and someone's running in direction B, at what point are they going to cross over? That's so applicable to our real
so important to know. Run from trains on the train track.
If the Federal Reserve is hiking interest rates at so-and-so rate and the 10-year yield is dropping at Y rate, at what rate?
Well, and so there's an argument for why math is important. You guys are making arguments for it.
And two, we agree. And so, and I think when you look at it, one of the things that we found was my wife started this school. She has 60 employees. They have hundreds of kids. They're opening up several other locations this year. And all their schools perform at least, or all their kids perform at least a grade higher level in all fundamentals, math, science, everything else. They also do out of school stuff. They teach finance, economics, starting a business. They do like Shark Tanks. And when you look at the private school and the level, they don't do tenure. They don't do anything else. What really interests me is the cost. So the cost for her to produce this on average is around $7,000 a kid a year. The average from the United States is like 14 or 15,000. And so she can outperform hands down while taking, oh, by the way, they don't do homework and no Fridays. They don't go to school on Fridays. They also do out of school stuff. They have outdoor activities. They teach mindfulness, where they teach kids social things and how to work on that. So they can fit all this in, no homework, not have school on Fridays, and they can outperform regular school at half the cost.
Our school district is $28,000 per student is how much they spend.
Yeah. And when people are like, you need to spend more money on school because you need to pay teachers more, I think everybody would be like, yeah, and we don't have anything wrong with paying teachers more if they're good and if the money actually goes to them, right? But the cost of school is skyrocketing, and yet teachers aren't getting paid more, and performance is dropping. So it doesn't work. And so what we're seeing is bonds are failing because nobody wants to fund schools anymore, which makes sense. Why fund a school that doesn't perform, yet it costs more and it fails? And this issue is a defining issue in the United States, I think, for a few reasons, because the people that have opportunities are going to so far outperform any of the other kids. If you take a kid that goes through my wife's private school compared to some school in, the Midwest that has no resources, very few people it's not a fair level playing field. They will crush them. They're going to understand finance. They're going to, oh, by the way, in high school, they start their college stuff. It's just not even a competing. And that's a huge problem, that we've gotten to a point where it's so skewed, whether you go to this school in Texas that I was looking at, where they have you think it's a Taj Mahal. It's so nice. And then you go to an inner city and they have nothing. And I think this is creating mass societal problems, because education should be the evening playing field, right? That's where we should even out the odds. We all have access to information that we can go and move and perform our lives. So I think that parents are concerned about it. And this lack of financial peace is causing problems with debt. It's causing problems of understanding fundamentally what's happening in the world that they created. Politics are driven by economics. Your choices are driven by economics, where you live, who you associate with, your overall ability to provide for yourself and financing. Yet these fundamentals aren't being taught, including we asked colleges, what's the number one thing you want us to teach them to get ready for the colleges that all these students go to? And guess what? All of them said the number one thing they wanted.
Art history,
gender studies. That's it. They wanted the kids to be able to take care of themselves. That's what they wanted. We want the kids to know how to use a credit card.
Well, and it's costing us as a society a lot of money. Like it goes back to the whole thing with it. We can either like do the old hand up or hand out, right? So we can either teach these people how to take care of themselves, or we're going to end up through social programs paying them that way. And the problem is that education currently, as it is a state level issue, right? So we currently have 21 states now. I think I saw something that said 23, but that do require some sort of financial education at the high school level. But that means there's 30 that don't, and require any financial education in their high schools. And so that's why you're seeing these issues. Like when we talk about mortgages, when they do studies on these mortgages, and this is across all socioeconomic, so it has nothing to do with like, how much money you make or how big the mortgage is. But if you, so if I'm looking at the stats here, 20% of the borrowers in the bottom quartile of financial literacy have experienced foreclosure, compared to 5% of those in the top quartile. So like if you just by to Jay's point before with this mortgage program, just by educating them on how this works, like 30% of US homeowners, so people who already own homes, don't understand what compound interest is. So just by getting those people that baseline fundamental, like we're not talking about major things. And I know it, my parents are both teachers. My mom was an economics teacher in high school, and in the Canadian school system, they actually have different tiers of like advanced, applied, and they kind of pigeonhole kids. Like, okay, certain kids, they know they're not going to college, so they start taking applied level classes. And if you're taking applied level classes, you have to take this one class, and I forget what it's called, but it teaches you how to budget. You have to set up and you have to budget your life, and this much goes to rent, this much goes to that. And they teach you about stuff like how does a mortgage work? Like I didn't know how a mortgage worked until I was 25 years old.
Right, but do they want you to though? That's so. First of all, we should definitely do that. We were talking about doing that conspiracy episode. We should probably throw this in terms of is this purposeful? Is this the conspiracy theory goes? This is what the government actually does. The government has no interest in making sure that you're financially literate because it makes their job easier. But where I don't want to go there. That'll be for the conspiracy episode. But I was going to ask AJ, is there any? I don't know the answer to this. Is there any studies of what the parents want? I mean, do the parents want their kids to be taught? Yeah.
Yes. The parents, and this is what it comes down to. This isn't conspiracy. The school system is ranked financial as one of the lower and lowest things that they care about. So the teachers union in the United States is the largest, most powerful union, well, in the United States and the world. And
it's bigger than auto workers?
Yeah.
Really?
It's huge. And the teachers union itself, right? We've entered a system where they are concerned about their job and what has to go into that. So we've lowered qualifications and everything, and they actually rank and they tell you this is what's important to the union and what we think we should be teaching, everything. And the stuff that the parents want does not align with what the school system's saying. So parents want and are asking for entrepreneurship, financial education. They want the kids to learn the things that they didn't, that now they have to learn and are applicable knowledge. And what you have is you find that the teachers unions, they don't want those things. They don't care about it, but too largely because they're not affected as much by it. The school system's a taxpayer funded thing. You don't really need to balance a budget and you can run over and it's just, everything else. So we have a complete disassociation with what the institution wants and is trying to achieve as opposed to what parents are. And what we've done now in the United States is we've actually set up rules to get the parents out. So the parents have actually become a problem. And the school system does not like the parents' involvement. And they are trying to actively set up barriers. And California is a huge one in this, where they actually list what a parents can know is happening and what they can't. And so like even at our school, we're like, no, we want to integrate parents. They need to be allies. Why? Because the parent being actively involved in their child's not only education, but life increases the odds of success for the child, right? And so we have these two competing things that are at odds. And I think it's become very apparent because outcomes are showing that the overall school system, which gets funded more, has more employees than it's ever had, right? And now outcomes with kids and students, parents aren't being heard. And that's why people are leaving and they're driving away. I think if you could accurately poll and just address the concerns of parents and everything, it's something that can be fixed. But they have no part in it. The teachers union gets to dictate everything.
Yeah, it's interesting. You also mentioned about this idea that which is I also had read that the standards are being lowered in order to sort of get better grades. As you guys know, I spent a lot of time. I'm originally from Chile, so I spent a lot of my early schooling years, 5th, 6th grade in Chile. And in Chile, and I think most of South American countries, you don't automatically pass to the next grade. Like if you don't get a minimum score, you repeat. Like if you're in 5th grade and you don't get the correct standards testing and everything, then all your friends go into 6th grade and you have to repeat 5th grade another year. And so it's not just this automatic, no matter how unapplied you are, you're automatically going to end up graduating in 12 years. So there isn't more of an incentive for you to actually pay attention to this stuff. But it's just a fascinating topic.
Hey, you can talk about conspiracy theories too, because it is more beneficial for the government to create these W-2 employees, right? Like business owners and self-employment, they don't pay taxes, and W-2 they do pay taxes. And I would argue that this problem is going to get worse because we have had this kind of boom of a gig economy where you have Uber and you have all these kind of side hustles that all these the millennials and younger can be doing right now. And they haven't learned how to set aside money for paying self-employment tax, for paying their own health insurance, for paying all these things. It was kind of always just built in or just assumed when you're going through school that you're going to go get this W-2 job, and that's kind of just taken care. You're just taken care of for you. You don't have to set aside for taxes. Your employer does that. Self-employment, saving for social security, stuff like that, 401ks. Like you don't have to worry about any of that stuff. Your retirement's going to be fine. Your taxes are going to be fine, and you don't have to learn about that. And now we have the kind of this side hustle is becoming a bigger thing, and you're going to have to figure all that stuff out.
The main things that the education system are pushing as far as careers are the same stuff that they were pushing like in the 50s. They're still stuck on, you need to become a doctor, a lawyer, you need to become architect or engineer.
Ford employee.
Yeah, exactly. Ford employee. And the teachers are so disconnected. And when you look at it, the kids that are going, I'm not going to be an engineer. I'm not going to be a doctor, right? What do they do? So when they ask, guess what the number one job that children today in America say that they're trying to do, because most of them don't think that they can achieve that. The number one job.
Be a YouTube creator?
An influencer. That's the number one thing, because they think that's their way out, because they don't understand the options and they don't think that they can even get there. And it's like, that is horrible.
Yeah, I'm so conflicted on this topic, and it makes me angry. Not at you guys, obviously. Let me start with, I think financial education is ridiculously important. I've volunteered at my kids' schools over the past 10 years to help teach financial literacy and financial education. But I feel like we're having such an ivory tower discussion still, because I think I grew up in Baltimore. I went to some schools that I wouldn't wish my worst enemies to go to growing up. And it's just so clear to me that we can talk about financial education and having that part of the curriculum. But I mean, reading and writing is part of the curriculum. And how many kids graduate from inner city schools in low income areas without the ability to read or write? Basic math is part of the curriculum. And how many kids graduate without the ability to do basic math? So the fact that we talk about adding it to the curriculum, I think there's something we're missing, and there's something else that needs to go on there. And I think it starts very much at home. I mean, we use this argument, and I don't want to get political, but I'm going to get political here for a second. We use this argument, like Kyle said, financial literacy is important because if you look at the data, you teach somebody to be financially literate, and there's a much less chance of them getting foreclosed on. Well, we can say the same thing about sex education. You teach kids about birth control, and there's a much lower chance of teenagers getting pregnant. But we still argue against doing that because we say that's something that's supposed to be taught in the home. And so we are putting responsibility on parents to a large degree to teach these life skills, whether it is sex education, whether it's drugs, whether it's religion, whether it's money. And yet we're not giving the parents the education they need and the resources they need to help teach their kids. I'm not using this as an excuse. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it.
But I feel like the crux of most of those arguments are religion too, though. Like if you want to talk about sex education, religion, some of these, especially Florida, every week you see something in Florida where they're arguing whether or not it should be in schools. Usually the basis is some sort of religious side. I don't see financial, like, teaching what a mortgage has any religious basis.
I disagree. I've had discussions with people who don't think their kids should be taught about entrepreneurship in school. They should be taught the skills to go out and get a good job. And they should be taught basically to be a good worker. All the things that we as entrepreneurs ourselves think is wrong, but there are a lot of people out there.
I mean, I could agree with that, but that, like, let's take it down to the basics. Like, let's talk about, like, let's teach someone what a mortgage is. Like, let's teach them that, because I still know, like, well-educated people that I hang out with who don't know how to mortgage works. They still think that, if I get a mortgage, then I'm paying myself. I'm not instead of paying rent. And they don't understand that the majority of that mortgage payment is actually interest at the beginning. Like, people don't understand those basics.
Yeah, but for people that can't read and write and that don't know basic math and can't write an essay, are they going to learn what a mortgage is? Is that going to affect their life? Are they going to pay attention in school? And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but I'm just saying there are bigger issues I think we should be addressing. And I feel like, yeah, this is a really important topic, but I feel like
But we currently have a requirement of, like,
if you look at it, that's why I started out saying, okay, before we even started talking about financial education, the school system itself right now is broken. It doesn't work. So it's like, yeah, we could talk about the financial education and how that's important. But at the end of the day, we're not learning math. So what the problem is right now, right, is the system itself. And when you don't have any trust in the system, and especially when they know what people are being taught and they're not allowed to teach, that's why people are leaving it and they're flocking away from it. And that's creating a tale of two cities. You have kids that are getting good education and your kids that aren't. And I'm talking about good education for kids that even struggle, right? I left school. I dropped out. I'm a high school dropout. I went to college, but I dropped out of school, tested out, and I went to college when I was 16 because I was failing in high school. I was excelling in college at 16.
What do you attribute that to?
I was ADHD and dyslexic, and they didn't have time. They didn't know what to do with me. So I was forgot about, and I was, room with 30 kids. It doesn't work. Nobody even understood what to do with me. And so they just said, well, he's not trying hard. And so I eventually stopped going to school. My parents are like, you can't keep skipping school. You have to be educated. I don't care what the problem is. You got to do it. And so they said, all right, here's two options. You can either test out or we're going to force you to go. But they ended up putting me in a class with the handicapped kids because they didn't know what to do with anybody. They had too much people, 30 kids. They didn't want to deal with me. They're like, just go away. And two, that's how the school system works.
Well, AJ, that was just foreshadowing. They knew you were going to be handicapped at some point in your life.
I know. See, it worked. They were ahead of the curve. If you look at that profile, it works.
Do you remember those days, AJ, when you were skipping to school?
Yes, I could skip then. I was skipping to do skiing. But the school system teaches that, a base level. And if you don't fit into it, they don't care.
Yeah, AJ, I probably already know the answer to this from what you're going to say, but I just pulled up Kyle, you mentioned something about being a state issue in 22 states. Don't forget, we do have the U.S. Department of Education too, Rich. So there is a federal thing. So now you got people in Washington making this. I just pulled up their website and it says,
no, most curriculum is a federal thing.
Yeah, the department's mission is to serve America's students, to promote student achievement and preparation for global competitiveness.
Wait, didn't Betsy DeVos fix all that? Didn't she come in and rework that all and fix everything for us?
Well, maybe she forgot to update the website. I don't know.
I mean, I guess my only, just to cap this off, I don't necessarily think it's any more important than some of these other issues that we're bringing up. But as far as that hierarchy, if you look back to what the requirements of high school are to graduate, I just think some level of base level financial education over, reading Tom Sawyer and being able to English and geography and stuff like that. I think it's at least as high, if not higher than those things.
I just wish there were more people like AJ's amazing wife, and I wish the government would finance it and we could implement that type of school everywhere. But the reality is, I think we're so far from that, and there's so many.
The teachers union fight us because how the pay works is you're paid per head. So every person that leaves a school is paid. They don't get paid on whether they're successful. They have to be in a seat. So they don't want you to leave the seat. Hence the reason why they also lowered requirements so you could keep moving and not leave school. So they get paid per head. And so if they view anybody homeschooling, that's why homeschooling in the United States is very much vilified, even though now it's like a major thing. There's more homeschoolers than ever, and they're increasing. But homeschool and private schools are villainized mainly by the teachers union, and they're actually fought against. The teachers union fights against them because it's taking money out of their pocket. And that's the problem.
Wow, let's not start shitting on teachers now, though. It's my parents are both ex-teachers, so I don't want to get into.
I didn't say teachers. The teachers union. We hire teachers. Teachers are the best. We want them.
I think Kiyosaki calls the teachers communists.
Kiyosaki calls everyone communist. So.
Everybody's a communist, Robert Kiyosaki. But,
right.
And that's the problem, Kyle. You're right. The teachers are what we need, and we need good ones. We look for the best ones and everything.
And we should pay them more.
And we should pay them more.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to be a teacher? Who wants to be a teacher in today's climate and getting paid what teachers get paid?
Yeah, you can't hit the students anymore. Why would you want to be a teacher? All right.
That's why we have our own kids.
Let's.
That's right. I do not hit my kids for anybody out there. No nasty messages.
Jay's going to get calls from the government. Excuse me, we need to look into your house.
Jay's got them so well trained now. He doesn't have to hit them anymore.
Just if you hit them early.
All right, let's finish this off with a top 10 because I did roll this into. AJ mentioned before that we're
nice. I'm really excited about this top 10 today.
Thanks, Mauricio.
I am really pumped. Let's do this. Let's go.
We don't rank anywhere near the top 10 in education system, so I thought I would do the top 10 rankings, and this is just financial literacy. This isn't education as a whole. This is just financial literacy, and. Spoiler alert, the U.S. does not make the top 10. So if we go through the top 10 of, I think AJ mentioned before, it was 57% is the U.S. But right at the top, we have Norway, Sweden, and are tied for the top spot at 71% of financial literacy.
I thought it would have been Singapore.
Nope. And then
I was going to bust out on my prejudices and say all the Asian countries, but
well, no, actually, so the Nordic countries are pretty good. They all do pretty well here. Denmark also. So it's Norway, Sweden, and Denmark are the top three. And then we have right after that Canada coming in 68%, and then Israel also at 68%. Then we have the United Kingdom at 67%, Germany 66%, the Netherlands 66%, Australia 64%, and rounding up the top 10, Finland 63%. So as I said, Europe,
those Scandinavian countries are crushing it.
Yeah, they're crushing it, and then
But Finland's fallen behind Norway and Sweden. Wow, what's going on there?
Sweden, as the Swedes would say, they are all Swedish, no Finnish.
So by the way, so you would think, not to get out, you would think that we'd be like, oh, maybe we should check out what they're doing over there, and maybe that's something that we should copy. It's not like we're trying to reinvent the wheel over here.
What would Kiyosaki say about those countries?
Communist.
He would say
socialist. That's the other one.
There's some pretty ladies over there.
Yeah. So anyway, the U.S. falls outside the tie. I think they were number 14, down at 57%. So got some work to do there, and I don't know if we're going to do it. Maybe we should just all move to Denmark.
or Canada.
Actually, if I would vote, I would say Sweden. But the problem is that it's pretty cold up there.
I was just about to say, all those countries that you named, with the exception of Israel, are cold.
There it is.
Yeah, I mean, Germany's okay. Yeah,
People have nothing better to do than sit inside and learn.
Exactly. They don't want to go outside.
And that explains AJ and his amazing schools, his wife's amazing schools. They're in Idaho. People have nothing better to do than sit inside and learn.
Just stay and learn. Don't go outside.
I've actually lived in a bunch. So like I've lived in Sweden, Germany, obviously Canada too. So you're right. The weather, maybe it's just the cold weather. They have nothing better to do than to actually teach their kids.
So wait a second. Conspiracy theory. I'm starting a conspiracy theory. Climate change is contributing to the world getting dumber. Things are warming and people aren't going inside and studying as much.
I'm on it, Jay. I sign off on your conspiracy theory. I'll ride that wave with you, man.
All right, let's commission a study. Commission a study. We'll get this. We'll get Nobel Prize here. All right, let's finish this off with a fun game. We already mentioned about AJ's not able to win a fight now, but back in the day, little did we know, AJ was a bit of a baller back in the day. He was a bit of a daredevil, and so I thought we could go back and say to poll the members here. Have you ever been in a fight? And if you have, how did you do? So let's start with AJ. Were you a fighting guy back in the day?
Yeah, I boxed. So I been a lot of fights. I do okay sometimes and not so good other times. So,
what was your record? Did you actually box, or was this just amateur outside the bar?
it wasn't like professional level. We went and did like training, things like that. But in Idaho, there wasn't a lot of infrastructure for boxing. So a lot more of it was just outside with our fists wrapped. But yeah, I would do pretty good. When I got to college, I think I got access to a lot bigger guys and guys that have played like baseball and could throw really hard. And so it was about then that I learned, this isn't my thing. I'm not going to do so hot. So I stopped.
What about you, Mauricio? You ever been in a fight?
Do I look like I'd ever be in a fight?
Well, you got a pretty punchable face, so I thought maybe someone else would start it.
I have a younger brother who's about 4 years younger than I am. So other than the fights I had with him, I'm a lover, not a fighter, Kyle. You know that.
Did you win when you fought your brother?
Of course. I'm like, twice the size. Back when I was 10 and he was 6.
Yeah. Mauricio's brother's 20 years younger than him.
Jay, were you ever a fighter in your life, or just those engineers and at Microsoft? They get in a lot of tilt.
I used to get beaten up a lot as a kid. So true story. I was not a popular kid. I was also not a strong kid. But after college, or during and after college, I spent a lot of time studying martial arts. I did some boxing as well. And I've never gotten into a fight. I'm smart enough to know exactly how far I can piss people off before it all turned into to something physical. And I'm really good at staying right on that edge.
Sounds like you took the Zuckerberg route.
Yeah, before we came on, you were sharing some photos as a kid with you and Nick Bollettieri. And if you were wearing those shorts when you were a kid, no wonder you were beaten up all the time.
Did you like the ball haircut?
Yeah, the ball haircut, the short shorts, and the.
Do you got that photo? Can you show that for the pod? You got it readily accessible?
You guys talk for a second.
Yeah. All right, Kyle, how about you? Well, he's pulling that up.
Dude, he's a hockey player. Are you kidding me?
So professionally, in our hometown, we used to get fights in all the time, but that was also Canada. And then I moved to Philadelphia, and I'm not getting in any street fights in Philadelphia. I'll get stabbed or shot. But back when I lived in small town London, Ontario, we used to get in bar fights outside the bar all the time, because you just getting to throw a couple punches and then someone would yell out, "The cops are coming," and everyone would scatter and run off into the park. And but no, I have on record 3 professional career fights in ice hockey, and I'm 1-1-1. And I learned pretty early that after I won my first fight,
Who scores those things?
actually it's funny, they have like sites that actually they give you like recaps of these things and stuff. So after I won my first fight, so the guy was a little bit shorter and he ducked his head down. So I was punching like his forehead, which is like pretty hard. And my hand swole up so much that I had trouble holding my stick the rest of the game. And I was like, geez, even if you win a fight, like there's like it's almost worse. So like there's zero benefit to this. And I also learned after I got like absolutely pummeled the one time that usually when you're asking people to fight, the guys will say yes are the ones who know what they're doing.
They're going to
win. You're asking people to fight all the time. The smart ones are saying no. It's the guys who know how to fight. Those are the ones that saying yes. So I was a little bit more selective after going that. So yeah, I'm 1-1-1 with in my career fights.
Nice. So for everybody that's waiting, here's your incentive to flip over to YouTube and actually watch this. Here's a picture of Jay Scott as as I was probably 11 or 12 there, maybe 13. You got the like the socks. How about them socks?
Rocking it, man.
The socks to short ratio.
Shorts.
The socks have more to them than the shorts do. So.
Yes. Yep. The socks are longer than the shorts.
And so you surprised that this kid used to get beaten up a lot as a kid?
I'm surprised he didn't win any fights. Actually, you got a good build there, Jay.
Yeah.
All right, great. You want to roll that into a plug, Jay, and finish this off?
I will plug the Saving Capitalism podcast hosted by this guy named AJ Osborne. I was a guest last week. We had an awesome discussion on the economy and all kinds of other stuff. So check out the Saving Capitalism podcast.
I feel like the education system is probably a good topic for Saving Capitalism podcast. But AJ, you want to plug something differently?
Something different than that one? Okay. You
can double plug it if you want.
Yeah, I think I will.
Everybody loves getting plugged twice. So
yeah, it's true. So I think that, it was cool because we just got a long time to really dive in to deep. And it was like right when the rate increases came up. So yeah, everybody go check it out. Cause I think, Jay's wisdom and everything he put into it, it was really, really high value. And the feedback I've already gotten from it, people were like, that was awesome. So Jay absolutely killed it. So go check it out.
First time I've ever heard Jay and wisdom in the same sentence, but that's okay. Let's move on to Mauricio.
I'm gonna plug and also make an announcement here because I've actually got the website up now, Real Estate Syndicator Live. I'm doing the podcast now. I moved to Mondays actually, so it was on Wednesdays at 4:30. I moved it to Mondays at 11:30, and you can sign up if you want to be a part of that at realestatesyndicatorlive.com.
It's great. Check it out. Once again, plugging my wife, Badass Investor. Check her out on all the socials, Instagram, YouTube, and whatnot. So I'm finishing off my C4 pre-work right now. So
you notice how his hat hasn't turned this
my
episode?
That's true.
Yeah,
that is true. I always thought there was no correlation between my my level of drinking and the hat, but that is true. I didn't turn it around the whole episode. So yeah, I got my pre-workout in me, so I'm gonna go hit the gym instead of hitting the head. So hopefully we can get AJ back for 2 episodes in a row. Get him back next week because it was great to have him back for this one. But hopefully I'll see all 3 of you next Tuesday.
See you next Tuesday, guys.
See you guys.